COVID vaccine lies and the lying liars who lie about them. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And as listeners, as regular listeners of Bold and Blunt, no, I do not like calling these COVID vaccines because they're really not vaccines, not as most Americans understand the term vaccine or the word vaccination. Because when they first came out, when they first were being discovered and they were first rolling out into the arms of American citizens, we were told oh so many times by everybody and anybody who had an opinion on the matter that the efficacy of these shots were 98%, 96%, 95%, 128%, 4,642%. Take your shot. It will save you. It will save your life, and it will save the lives of everybody around you, everybody in your community. It's the patriotic duty of every man, woman, and child in America to take these shots. And then we found out, just a few short weeks later, well, remember that little 98% efficacy that we were talking about? Turns out, it's more like 66%. And then wait a few more weeks and, oops, my bad, it's more like 42%. But as Anthony Fauci said, if one face mask is good, then two are even better. It's common sense. Well, if one shot doesn't do the trick, then two must, or three, or four, or five, which is why we have now this trend of continuing endless booster after booster after booster. You know, if something really works, you don't need to keep taking the same something in order to make sure it continues to work, right? When I got my vaccines as a kid, I didn't have to keep taking them every year into my adulthood. They were pretty much good. I was good. I was told I was protected, just like every other American, right? When you got your typical MMR shots and polio and so forth, you were told that you were protected and you didn't have to take them every year, or worse, every few months. Now, the COVID shots are being pushed into the column of annual must-haves, along with your flu shots that really don't save you from getting the flu anyhow, because there are so many different variants of influenza that come each year. It's impossible to keep up, to get ahead of the info you need about that particular strain in order to stop it from spreading. Well, so too with COVID. But if you're one of these people out there in America who still believe in the power of the shot, still believe in the power of Big Pharma and politicians to tell you the right way to go, then you are going to want to listen to this information in this particular podcast dealing specifically with Pfizer and the population control conspiracy theories that, guess what? Maybe it's not such a conspiracy theory after all. And before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, the online platform for your faith-based podcast, at washingtontimes.com, where, guess what, you may also subscribe to my 3 times a week newsletter. Comes out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right to your email box. Go to the bottom of washingtontimes.com, find newsletter section, click on it, and then look for Cheryl Chumley, Bold and Blunt. Click on that, and there you have it. Just put in a little bit of information, and you will be subscribed to get my commentaries as well as my twice weekly Tuesday and Thursday Bold and Blunt podcasts. And a lot of them you really don't want to miss. My ego tells me you don't want to miss any of them, but let's be real. Some of them put out more information than others. This one today you do not want to miss, because it gives you so much information about what's taking place in the world of Big Pharma meet political self-interest, and it's devastating, astonishing, shocking, and outright frightening. One more quick mention, though. I want to say thank you publicly to Jack Hibbs, Pastor Jack Hibbs out in California. He heads up the Calvary Chapel Chino Hills Church there, and my podcast, my Bold and Blunt podcast, is now part of this real life network put out by the church and Pastor Jack Hibbs and the tremendous people that he has working with him to spread the word about God first and individual liberties and the Constitution second. So check out that site, check out Real Life Network, because there are tons more. Go to edify.app, go to washingtontimes.com, and then go to Real Life Network and check out all the stuff there that is available to you to fight the far left, right? Because let's be serious now. The far left has come out of its corners. The cockroaches are on the march, and they're not going back quietly unless we fight with as much boldness and bluntness and brashness even that they're bringing to the battlefield. Yeah, this left has no shame any longer. Used to be Democrats, when they were called things like socialists, they would go, oh, no, I'm not a socialist. And they would run scrambling, and they would quiet down their socialist rhetoric. And maybe even sometimes they turned from their socialist doings because they were so petrified of being painted as a socialist, which meant they knew they would lose their political seats, because there was a time in America that socialism brought out the spit of every patriotic American. You say socialist, we all say spit. We spit on the ground, right? Because they don't belong here. They do not belong in America's political system. They do not belong serving on the tax dime. Well, those days are over with. And now you don't have just open socialists serving in Congress. You have crazy lunatic socialists telling patriotic Americans that our way of thinking, our way of life, our vision of America is the radical one that needs to go, even though our vision is the one upon which our nation was built. God-given individual liberties, that's called American exceptionalism, and that's what built this nation. Not socialism. You didn't build that, socialist cockroach. You did not build that. Socialists only break things, destroy, tear down. And they do it loudly because they can't stop crying about things, right? They don't just quietly do their work. They don't quietly do their deeds of destruction. That's not their way. They have to cry. They have to cry loudly. Just listen, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Minnie Mouse out there in Congress, yapping away and shaking her finger and bouncing, getting so enlivened by her own rhetoric that she starts bouncing. Well, that's the way of socialists now. And the thing is, they're everywhere. They're outed. They're everywhere. They're loud and proud and brash and just evil in their leanings, and this leads back to this whole COVID shot debate. How so? Simply put this way. In America, it's supposed to be all about individualism, individual choice, individual determination, individual self-rule, especially individual decision-making when it comes to health matters, health care. In socialist societies, everything is filtered through the vein, through the consideration of what's good for the state. It's all about collectivism. It's all about getting everybody to go along, to get along, so that the state, the government, is the one that remains the powerful, is the one that remains the strongest. Who cares about the individual? We only care about the individual in a socialist country insofar as what the individual can contribute to the state. It's individualism versus collectivism. And what we saw take place under the mandates, under Joe Biden's mandates for these shots to be put practically into the arms of every man, woman, and child in America, what we saw was collectivism at work. We saw socialism at play. Really, we saw a dictatorship going on there, but let's just stick with the line of logic that this is the socialist, collectivist way of life. It never should have gotten that far. It never should have been that way. And here is a headline, one headline, that tells one reason, just one reason, why it never should have been that way in America. Why a judge ordered FDA to release COVID-19 vaccine data pronto. Do you remember that? Go back in time to January 2022, and there was an issue in the courts about the FDA, our Food and Drug Administration wanting to withhold information about the development of the Pfizer shot for 75 years. And it had to go to court, right? Let me read from this piece quickly. A group of scientists and medical researchers sued the FDA under FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, to force release of hundreds of thousands of documents related to licensing of the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. Plaintiff's attorney Aaron Siri, who is representing the group, explains the fight that led a federal court to order expedited release of documents the agency claimed it would take decades to process. In response to this FOIA request, the FDA asked a federal judge for permission to make the public wait until the year 2096 to disclose all the data it relied upon to license Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. Do you get what that meant? That meant that the FDA allowed Pfizer, based on Pfizer's data, to go forth and put the shots in the arms, sell the shots to consumers to put the shots in the arms of men, women, and children. And so the FDA, by doing that, by granting the emergency health use authorization, whatever it's called, to Pfizer, so Pfizer could get its shots to market, the FDA was in essence saying that it had reviewed all the data that Pfizer gave it. And it found in its review of this data that the shot was safe and effective for American citizens. So that information should have been right there at the very top of the pile of FDA's desk. And instead, the FDA said, nope. When Americans wanted a look at that information, at that decision-making information for Pfizer's shot, all of a sudden FDA, who's like, oh no, it's going to take years. It's going to take 75 years, in fact, to go through all this data. Well, wasn't that data right on the top of the pile that the FDA just sifted through to issue Pfizer the okay to sell its shots, to put its shots into the arms of American citizens? Red flag, big red flag right there. And so all these scientists sued, all these medical researchers sued, all these patriotic Americans sued. And guess what? The judge said, hold the phone on this, release the data and do it now. But there's a reason why the FDA/Pfizer didn't want this information released. And that leads into my guest today. Her name is Naomi Wolf, and she has researched exactly what was going on with Pfizer's COVID shots and the concealing of information from the American public. And I gotta say, if you've had this Pfizer shot, you're definitely going to want to listen. But you're also definitely going to want to pray. And if you haven't had this Pfizer shot, then you're definitely not going to want to take it anytime in the future. Naomi Wolf, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So there are some shocking press releases coming across my desk about what you've discovered about Pfizer with these COVID shots. And you are the author of The Bodies of Others, The New Authoritarians, COVID-19, and the War Against the Human. The War Against the Human. Talk about what you found.
Sure. So that book is really about the last 2.5 years since 2020 and how the pandemic has been exploited by our adversaries, by big tech, obviously by pharma, by our administration, whom I'm embarrassed to say I voted for, in order to strip people of their rights. And I think that's a pretty well-established argument now, even though at the time I wrote it, it was novel. But what I think you're referring to with the press releases that are coming across your desk is even more disturbing. And so this is a project that began a year ago when Aaron Siri, the attorney, successfully sued the FDA in order to force the FDA to release tens of thousands of internal Pfizer documents. And the judge agreed with Aaron Siri and compelled the FDA to release them, even though the FDA asked the judge to keep them hidden for 75 years till we are all no longer on the planet. But they were released, and I was worried as a journalist that these documents would sort of go down the memory hole because, A, they're so voluminous, it's hard for a news outlet to cover them, but B, they're very technical. So I put out a call on my site, Daily Clout, and Steve Bannon put out a call on his site, War Room, or his platform, War Room, and as a result, we now have 3,500 doctors and RNs and biostatisticians, scientists, medical fraud investigators, clinicians, lab clinicians, biological scientists, highly credentialed experts under a War Room Daily Cloud joint project in which these experts are reading through these Pfizer documents under the leadership of my COO, Amy Kelly. So I'm going to cut to the chase. These 3,500 experts have found in the Pfizer documents the greatest crime against humanity in recorded history in terms of 1,225 deaths, tens of thousands of neurological events, tens of thousands of blood clots, lung clots, leg clots, debilitating conditions like tens of thousands of examples of arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. Many of the deaths and the adverse events happen within 48 hours of people being injected. But I'm going to skip past all of that and get to what I think is in the heart of what these experts have found in what are now 74 reports linked to the primary source documents. And what they found, unfortunately, is a 360-degree focus on destroying human reproduction in the Pfizer document.
Human reproduction. The intent was to destroy human reproduction, or that was a byproduct?
Well, so I'm a journalist, and nowhere in the Pfizer documents does it say the goal of this intervention is to destroy human reproduction, of course. However, I'm also a woman, and there's so much in the Pfizer documents about knowing that the lipid nanoparticles pack themselves into the ovaries and that there's no way that they leave the female body. And I was actually deplatformed in 2021 from Twitter for raising an alert about women having menstrual problems. Now, many studies have confirmed that that is, in fact, true post-injection. Pfizer knew that the lipid nanoparticles traverse the placenta, even though Rochelle Walensky and all the spokespeople assured pregnant women that was not the case. And they knew that babies were dying in utero because of what they called, in their documents, transplacental exposure to the vaccine. They knew that the vaccine was compromising placentas, and in fact now 4 different independent sources, Dr. Jim Thorpe, a maternal fetal medicine specialist, 2 independent midwives, one named Ellen Jasmer in Northern California, Dr. Ryan Cole, they're all finding the same thing which Pfizer predicted, which is these compromised placentas of vaccinated women with nettings of calcifications, and also that do not grow to the normal size. So babies have to be induced. Pfizer knew that there's a section of Pfizer documents where 80% of the pregnant women who are followed to the end of their pregnancy lose their babies to spontaneous abortions or miscarriage. Pfizer knew that the lipid nanoparticles and the mRNA accumulate in the lymph and the blood, as I mentioned, of women, which is what breast milk is made of, and they knew that it would accumulate in vaccinated women's breast milk. And so they knew that lactating vaccinated women were giving their poor newborn babies convulsions. There's a chart in the Pfizer documents that shows, and this is what's so chilling, if I can possibly convey this, and I'm Jewish, so it's especially, chilling to me to see this, these very scientific charts showing 20 different ways they're torturing newborn babies. These babies have swollen flesh, swollen tissue from exposure to the mom's breast milk with polyethylene glycol and lipid nanoparticles in it from the vaccine. These babies are having multi-organ system failure. This one poor baby is rushed to the hospital and dies after nursing from a vaccinated mom. These babies have fever, these have agitation, these have sleeplessness, all fully detailed in the Pfizer documents. Pfizer knew that, so disgusting, they define exposure to the vaccine in the Pfizer documents as including skin contact and inhalation, meaning shedding, which, people were dismissed for wondering about it as being crazy, but Pfizer defines exposure as skin contact and inhalation. Pfizer also defines exposure as sex with a vaccinated man, and they warned vaccinated men not to have sexual intercourse with women of childbearing age, or if they did so, to use 2 reliable forms of contraception. And they don't explain that further, but Pfizer's experiments are constructed around the premise that there's something that is damaging either to women or to their zygotes if they conceive via exposure to vaccinated men's bodily fluids. Pfizer knew that the lipid nanoparticles degrade male sexual health and reproduction. Andrology Journal confirmed that the injections lower men's sperm count and sperm motility, but even apart from that, the Pfizer documents show, and our COO, Amy Kelly, found this, that they degrade the testes because they're encased in a membrane also, of course, of baby boys in utero. And they also degrade the Sertoli cells and the Leydig cells, which are the factories of masculine hormones at puberty. They turn on the things that turn boys into men, like broad shoulders, deep voices, body hair, the ability to father a child. So we don't know if these baby boys of vaccinated moms, even if they're never vaccinated, are going to grow up and become normal, fertile men.
Let me ask you a quick question here, because I'm just in shock at all the findings from this these Pfizer documents. Could you address this point? Does Pfizer, in its documents that you have, does it just report the data of all that you described, or does it make the case of correlation versus causation? Does it explicitly state that there's a correlation between the shots, or there's a cause of the shots for bringing about these dramatic health impacts? Do they make that case? Do they make it clear it's due to the shots?
That's a great question. I can't stress enough. Well, first of all, everyone listening, and you too, should know that you can go right to dailycloud.io and see these documents for yourself. All of them are right there on the upper right-hand corner, and the 74 reports that the experts have produced are also right there for free. No one should take my word for this. I know it's very shocking. So they're all very scientific documents. However, there are sections where I would say, and this goes to your question about did they know, I would say that they are acknowledging causation. Again, I mentioned that there's this section where these 2 babies died in utero because of their being delivered prematurely due to or subsequent to, quote, transplacental exposure to the vaccine. So that, I think is pretty damning. I think also when you see something like another chart I haven't mentioned yet, which shows 20 different horrible ways they knew that the injection was ruining women's menstrual cycles. And again, you've got a picture of this by Dr. Robert Chandler, a distinguished sports medicine physician who treated the Angels and the Lakers and other national sports teams. He found this chart. It's got tens of thousands of women in each category of bleeding every single day of your life. 2 periods a month, tens of thousands of women. No periods at all. Thousands of women. And in Europe, there's a group called Uemo Sleep. 10-year-old girls being, menstruating upon being injected. 80-year-old women menstruating or bleeding upon being injected, long postmenopausal. Agonizing cramps. the hemorrhagic passage of tissues. So they knew they were doing this to tens of thousands of women. I mean, literally tens of thousands of women. They documented it, and they kept going. So these are not, you're a woman, I'm a woman. These are not normal things that just happen to women. So that's another example, I would say, of them knowing they were causing these outcomes and not cautioning women. I would say with the breastfeeding, they knew that at least one baby died from exposure to vaccinated breast milk. They knew that it was the exposure to the vaccine in the breast milk. They didn't warn women not to breastfeed their babies if they were vaccinated. So, to me, that's at least criminal neglect to warn.
For me, when I heard that Pfizer didn't want to release their findings for 75 years, that was the biggest red flag. That was a tell that there was something in there they were trying to cover up. But let me ask you this, Naomi, because people listening who have had the Pfizer shot are probably in a little bit of a panic mode right now, wondering, well, what do I do? What do you tell people who have had this Pfizer shot? And why is it just Pfizer? Where are the other, the big pharma manufacturers in this as well?
Yeah, great question. Well, we only right now have the Pfizer documents because of this successful lawsuit.
Right.
But I'm glad to say that the same judge, I believe, ordered Moderna to release their documents. So next month, my 3,500 experts are avidly anticipating pouring through the Moderna documents. And in fact, what we have found is that Moderna, I'm sorry about everyone listening, Moderna is more than 3 times as lethal or damaging as Pfizer because it's got more than 3 times the active ingredients, the lipid nanoparticle, the mRNA, and the spike protein. So that's the only reason that it's Pfizer right now, not Moderna. It's just these 2 different lawsuits took place at 2 different times. So I'm not a medical doctor.
Right.
And I believe me, I lie awake. I literally pray every night for my loved ones who took these injections. And I recognize all around me people suffering from health conditions that they don't know are in the Pfizer documents subsequent to the injection. Their doctors are not telling them. They don't know that they're vaccine injured. This is all around me. So what do I tell people? Well, I guess first, don't take any more. No more boosters. Don't do it. No more flu shots because they're trying to get this lipid nanoparticle platform into everything now. They're trying to get it into our food supply. Britain just rolled out a universal, of course, Bill Gates funded lipid nanoparticle platform. These lipid nanoparticles have been known for 10 years. Dr. Chandler says they're like a shotgun blast to the body. They go everywhere. So no more. I refer people to the wellness company, Disclosure. They sponsor us, but they're also finding, some kinds of supplements like nattokinase that seem to dissolve the spike protein. I tell my loved ones to do, it's so inadequate, right? But what heals lymphatic drainage massage, saunas, exercise, vitamin D is very important, sunlight, good nutrition. You have to do everything possible to help your body deal with a very severe state of inflammation, among other things. This is horrible, but a lot of women are, I hate to say this, I don't advocate it, but a lot of people are choosing their partners now, based on their vaccine status, and especially if they're childbearing age women who want to have babies. They're choosing to be with unvaccinated men. That's not great. I don't think that's a permanent solution. Lots of, we can't give up on half of humanity, but some people are making that choice. I'm not telling people what to do. I guess what I would say a little more hopefully is that we've tasked our 3,500 experts now with finding solutions. And honestly, I think the people who created this, they know some answers. And they're not telling. They know why they cautioned vaccinated men from having sex with childbearing age women. They know, they know the antidotes, right? They know what the lipid nanoparticles do. they are the people in all the world who should be able to tell us what to do to protect ourselves. So I think they need to be, Bourla and respectfully Dr. Robert Malone and, the other people who originated this injection need to be, brought back in front of Congress and made to answer questions about what is the antidote, what can cleanse the body of this. Because what's so scary is that in all the work these volunteers of ours have done, they don't see any way the human body gets rid of the lipid nanoparticles. They just accumulate and accumulate with every injection.
Oh my
so
goodness!
That's one thing that has to be done. And I'm just going to say it. I'm a very rational, grounded, fact-based journalist. But honestly, I resort to prayer these days. I've begun to think that this is kind of bigger than any human technology can solve. It's a wholesale attack on humanity and the future of humanity. So I have to believe that a higher power also, helps heal bodies. But that's not a very reassuring answer.
Well, I think a lot of people in America have been on that last part about prayer for some time because they've seen how the coronavirus has been exploited. The last question I wanted to ask you and do you have time? I know we're over. Do you have a couple more minutes?
No, I do. I'm waiting for something. So, yeah.
Okay. I'll make it quick. So I guess a lot of people are wondering about the accountability of all that you described. My personal viewpoint is that there is not going to be any accountability that matters on this. I would just like the lesson learned going forward to never again have a government that mandates shots. What do you see taking place as an outcome of all of this?
Well, I have to say I'd like to push back, gently on what you just concluded, because to me, I've been trying so hard to warn the world about these findings for over a year now. And as you may know, I used to appear on every major news outlet. I used to be a columnist for 4, global news publications. And now I'm persona non grata, anywhere in the legacy media because I'm reporting on these facts. So I guess where I'm going with that is I think the Washington Times has a very big role to play in bringing this information to the public, and other news outlets that, are willing to not be closed off by pharma money or by CARES Act money, a lot of which went to media. So I think it's incredibly important that you guys are covering it. I hope the print version covers this issue and covers these reports. And I guess there has to be accountability, right? Because it's not enough to just not mandate.
Right.
Dr. Walensky testified to Congress and perjured herself seriously twice. And no one apparently knew that. I knew it because I've gone over the Pfizer documents reports. She said that they were safe and effective, and Pfizer knew from November of 2020 that they weren't, that they had failure of efficacy. They didn't stop infection. They didn't stop, the third most common side effect in the Pfizer documents of getting vaccinated is COVID. So that's a lie, and she knew it. And she also claimed that they didn't transmit, which also the Pfizer documents show is a lie. So that's a criminal offense to perjure yourself in front of Congress. So there has to be accountability, or else, look, even if they don't mandate, these people are trying to put this material in our pharmaceuticals. I'm delaying going back to finish a root canal because I read from a good source that lipid nanoparticles are now in, anesthesia in the dentist's office.
Really?
Yeah. So these people have to go to jail, after being tried. We're suing the White House and Dr. Walensky and Pfizer, and that's hard to do. It's very expensive. George Smith, our lawyer, has 10 plaintiffs in Ohio suing them, so people have to sue. But, Nuremberg happened, and there were Nuremberg trials. This has been a massive criminal experiment on humanity. It's a mass murder event, and it shouldn't be just me, respectfully, with my tiny startup and a handful of other kind of dissident doctors trying to call attention to this. It really has to be, news outlets such as yours and representative government, members of Congress dragging these people into accountability and then taking criminal action, both civil and criminal action against them.
That would be a happy day for many in America who, as you've pointed out, have suffered from these shots and these mandates and the whole exploiting of the coronavirus. Naomi Wolf, you are doing such a great service to humanity right now by digging deep into this, and I think we're all waiting on pins and needles for the Moderna documents to drop. Your website again is Daily Clout, that's CLOUT.io, right?
Yes, that's correct. And people can go to Amazon to order the War Room Daily Clout Pfizer Documents Research Reports. And please do, because it's a life-saving book, but also it helps us fight this fight.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Naomi Wolf, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt.
Thank you so much.
Daily Clout, DAILYCLOUT.io. Check it out. Go to the website. Read through it, do your own digging. You know, journalism, by and large, has fallen on tough times in terms of receiving the trust of the American public. But truthful journalists will always tell you, don't believe me, check it out yourself. And so that's exactly what Naomi said to do. So do it. DailyClout.io. I want to thank you for listening. Remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, and wherever podcasts are available. Also, quickly mention, you may also now get Bold and Blunt at Real Life Network. That is the platform of more faith-based videos and podcasts from Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills Church out in California. I want to thank them publicly very much for including my Bold and Blunt among their esteemed lineup of faith-based offerings. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.